Ferrari was lost, on the brink of the abyss. But everything changed in Bahrain. How did they do it? Today we tell you the SF-25's best-kept secret, its new floor. Is it truly miraculous? Can Ferrari fight for the 2025 championship? Stay tuned because what you're about to hear will change how you view this season. Ferrari started the 2025 season in a real storm. Expectations were sky-high. A new car, the SF-25, a driver lineup featuring Charles Leclerc, and none other than seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, making his debut with the Scuderia. Everything pointed to this being the year of their return to the top. However, reality was a brutal blow. After the first 3 races, Ferrari was in 7th place in the Constructors' Championship, just 5 points behind Williams, behind Sauber. A sporting humiliation for a team with Ferrari's history and budget. Disappointment gripped the paddock, the media, and above all, the fans themselves who couldn't believe what they were seeing. But how did this disaster come about? The nadir came at the Australian Grand Prix. There, according to fairly consistent, though unofficially confirmed, reports, Ferrari made a serious strategic error. Fearing possible premature wear of the floor, they decided to increase the car's ride height. In other words, they raised the SF-25 off the ground, sacrificing its aerodynamic performance. It was a defensive decision taken cautiously, but it turned out to be a step backward. And most worrying, this decision was made despite having had 3 full days of testing in Bahrain. Ferrari had tried configurations, heights, and variables. They had the data, and yet they still got it wrong. The mistake didn't just cost them points. It exposed a much deeper problem. The SF-25's aerodynamic concept seemed to operate within too narrow a window, a very limited operating range that didn't forgive even the slightest deviation in setup. When a Formula One car only performs well under very specific conditions, what you have is not a versatile car. You have a ticking time bomb. Because on a calendar full of circuits with different characteristics, a car without adaptability is doomed to inconsistency. That was the Ferrari of the early races, a car that, instead of adapting, suffered. A car that, instead of evolving, got lost. And in that context, the pressure on the Maranello engineers reached extremely high levels. The package of improvements planned for Miami had to be urgently brought forward to Bahrain. Ferrari was on the ropes. This context not only explains the technical situation, it also gives us the emotional key. Because when a team like Ferrari sees its honor, its reputation, and its 2025 project falter after just 3 races, what's at stake isn't just performance, it's identity. And with that weight on its shoulders, Ferrari gambled everything on a radical solution, redesigning the SF-25's floor. What came next would completely change the championship landscape. Faced with the competitive disaster with which the season began, Ferrari had no time for regrets. In Maranello, they quickly understood that if they didn't act decisively, 2025 would become another lost season. The alarm bells were already ringing. The prestige of Formula One's most historic team was at stake, and with it, the credibility of a project that had excited millions of fans. The reaction had to be immediate and radical. Therefore, what was originally a package of updates scheduled for the Miami Grand Prix was urgently brought forward to Bahrain. And these weren't just simple touch-ups. It was a surgical intervention on the heart of the single-seater, the floor of the SF-25. Why the floor? Because in the current era of Formula One dominated by ground effect, this part of the car isn't just a technical detail, it's the heart of everything. It's where most of the downforce is generated. It's the place that decides whether the car is competitive or not. And Ferrari knew it. The engineers at Maranello completely restructured the airflow under the SF-25. The floor vents, the small vertical elements that channel the airflow in the lower front area, were redesigned. The edges, the floor body, the diffuser, and the rear wing were adjusted. The key was to create a cleaner, more controlled airflow that would minimize energy losses and improve aerodynamic stability in corners. But the true genius of the redesign lay in an even deeper detail: the intention to allow the car to operate at a lower height from the road surface without losing stability. In other words, to bring the SF-25 closer to the ground to exploit the full potential of ground effect without causing bouncing, loss of grip, or instability. This was something Ferrari had previously failed to achieve. The problem was clear. To avoid inconsistencies, Ferrari was forced to operate the car higher than ideal, thus losing a good portion of the aerodynamic downforce it could achieve. With the new modifications, the SF-25 could run lower and, therefore, in its optimal working configuration. This not only improved cornering but also had a direct impact on tire management, race pace, and overall stability. This reconfiguration was also a statement of intent. Ferrari was not going to resign itself to being a mid-table team. They were going to double down on their technical commitment, and they would do so with the reaction speed of a team that still believes it can fight for the top. What was at stake wasn't just saving a season. It was showing that Maranello still has the capacity to reinvent itself and surprise. In Bahrain, the first signs were promising. The car performed more steadily, and Charles Leclerc's third-place finish, which turned into second due to a penalty for George Russell, was the clearest proof that something had changed. Not everything was settled, but for the first time in 2025, Ferrari seemed to have found a clear path to recovery. And that path started literally from the ground up. Calling the SF-25's new floor miraculous may sound exaggerated. But in Formula One, where tenths of a second are the difference between the podium and anonymity, what Ferrari achieved with this part is immaterial. It was a technical turning point that changed everything. The first thing to understand is that this isn't just a visual or superficial modification. It's a complete reinvention of the concept of how the SF-25 interacts with the ground. Every part of the redesign was calculated to modify how the airflow behaves under the car, and above all, how it's channeled to the rear, where much of the downforce that defines performance in high-speed corners is generated. The key lies in aerodynamic stabilization. Before this update, Ferrari had a structural problem. The car couldn't run at its optimal height because it was unstable. This forced engineers to raise the car a few millimeters more than ideal. That decision alone could represent between 1 and 2 tenths of a second per lap in lost performance. In elite F1, that difference isn't small. It's a huge chasm. With the new floor, the SF-25 can now run lower, closer to the asphalt, exactly where its aerodynamic design was designed to operate. This, in practical terms, means the entire car enters its maximum performance zone. The diffuser works better. The previously erratic vortices are now controlled. The downforce becomes more stable. And that translates into more precise handling, more driver confidence, more efficient tire management, and better traction out of corners. Another aspect that makes it so special is how it's designed to adapt to more circuits. One of the SF-25's big problems in the early races was its conceptual rigidity. It only performed well under very specific conditions. The new floor not only improves absolute performance, it also expands the car's operating window. This allows Ferrari to adapt the setup to different circuits without losing consistency. But the real indication that this update is different is in the track data. In Bahrain, for the first time, sensors indicated that the car was running closer to the ground than at any previous race. Not because they forced it, but because the SF-25 now allows it naturally, without jumps, without bouncing, without loss of load. The relationship between the car and the asphalt has changed. And that, in a sport where aerodynamics is everything, is as close to a miracle as you can ask for. Furthermore, the way these improvements integrate with the rest of the car is another plus. The floor doesn't work alone. It connects with the side walls, the rear diffuser, and the side pods. This entire aerodynamic ecosystem has been recalibrated, making the car's performance not only better, but more predictable. And in Formula One, predictability is power. Calling it miraculous isn't a media exaggeration. It's a way of summarizing the enormous leap Ferrari has made with a single piece. It's not just about adding tenths of a second. It's about regaining confidence, regaining technical direction, and above all, regaining the real possibility of competing. What once seemed like a stalled project now has direction. And it all started from the bottom. From where the SF-25 touches the ground. Bahrain was the starting point. But Jeddah, home of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, is the true test of the improvements Ferrari introduced to the SF-25. Because if there's a circuit where aerodynamic efficiency, high-speed stability, and cornering precision are pushed to the limit, it's the Corniche Street circuit. Ferrari arrives at this event with a setup specifically tuned for Jeddah. This is no coincidence. The team has not only kept the new floor, but has also opted to use a low downforce rear wing profile. This decision is strategic. They are confident that the new floor generates enough downforce to reduce drag. That is, more straight-line speed without losing as much grip in corners. These types of adjustments are what make the difference on a circuit like the Saudi Arabian, where top speed can determine the fate of an entire race. But it's not just a matter of wings. Ferrari has been working on additional updates that also impact performance. One of them is the modification of the side pods, specifically in the undercut area, the lower part that allows air to be channeled efficiently towards the rear. This change aims to increase the volume of flow directed towards the lower part of the car, further enhancing the ground effect. In addition, Less visible but highly relevant solutions have also been implemented inside the car. One of the key elements is a new flow diverter, located next to the rear wing's central pillar support. This does not involve generating direct downforce, but rather intelligently redirecting hot air to areas where it can help improve the efficiency of the rear diffuser. A downwash effect is created, a decrease in flow that improves the car's behavior at high speed. The question everyone is asking is, will it perform as well in Jeddah as it did in Bahrain? Because if the updated SF-25 can perform on two circuits as different as these, then Ferrari will have taken a real step toward recovery. The development logic points to that. The parts aren't just working individually, they're also beginning to work in synergy. But the most important thing isn't just happening on the track. It's in the team's mindset. Ferrari has outlined an aggressive evolution plan for the rest of the season. Between the Imola and Barcelona Grand Prix, substantial new improvements are planned. The floor was just the beginning. More changes will follow in the bodywork, aerodynamics, and possibly cooling. Everything points to a Scuderia determined not to stagnate. This approach isn't just technical, it's also symbolic. Because for years, one of Ferrari's greatest problems has been the lack of continuity in its development. They started well, got lost in the middle of the calendar, and ended resigned. This time, the message is different. Ferrari isn't going to stop. Of course, there is a warning. The real challenge isn't just improving the car. It's understanding it, mastering it, knowing how to configure it for each track, each climate, each type of asphalt. The mistake in Australia, where they supposedly lifted the car for fear of floor wear, made it clear that having a good car is useless if you don't know how to exploit it. The key will be to expand that operating window, that range in which the SF-25 can perform at its best without compromising its stability. What's at stake goes beyond a podium or a single victory. What Ferrari is looking for is to be feared again, to be respected, to be once again a title contender. And the path, although still long, seems clearer than ever. Because if the SF-25 also performs in Jeddah, then we can start talking about a Ferrari capable of fighting on all fronts. Ferrari has made a big bet. It has invested time, resources, and above all, credibility, in a technical direction that is now beginning to show clear signs of recovery. What once seemed like a disoriented and disorganized project is beginning to show signs of structure, logic, and evolution. But the big question remains, is it enough? The new SF-25 floor has been the catalyst for a change, not only in the car's behavior but also in the team's attitude. Ferrari has stopped being reactive and become proactive. It has begun to make bold decisions, to anticipate, to not give up. This is perhaps the most significant transformation that has taken place at Maranello since the start of the 2025 season. But it's important to be realistic. Calling this floor miraculous is in part rhetorical license. Because in Formula One there are no miracles. Everything is measured, tested, and developed with obsessive precision. What Ferrari has achieved is not a product of luck. It is the result of understanding its mistakes, correcting its course, and executing effectively. However, it is also true that, for a team that had been in free fall, any progress that restores stability can feel like a blessing. And that is what this new floor represents. Not a magic trick, but a solid technical foundation on which to build a competitive project again. Many unknowns still remain. Will Hamilton be able to adapt to the SF-25? Will Leclerc be the one to lead this recovery? Will both drivers have the car they need to challenge McLaren, Red Bull, or even Mercedes? Will the improvements be sustained at more demanding circuits like Suzuka, Spa, or Silverstone? Beyond the immediate answers, what Ferrari needs now is consistency. It's not enough to shine one weekend. What defines a true title contender is the ability to maintain performance race after race, to constantly evolve, and to minimize errors. The next step will be decisive. If the SF-25 in Jeddah confirms the good feeling from Bahrain, Ferrari can look to the rest of the season with well-founded optimism. If, on the other hand, performance declines or inconsistency resurfaces, everything achieved so far could be undone in a matter of weeks. But today, at least today, Ferrari is back in the conversation. And that, after a start to the season that bordered on catastrophic, is a triumph in itself. The ground hasn't been miraculous. The miraculous thing is that, for the first time in a long time, Ferrari seems to have understood what it needs to win again.